God, I had it at some point. Let's see where this is used in the code base. This create transient thing. Yeah, we had this texture creator component. Which we spent a little bit of time making. We had like set data and everything like that on it. And we ended up not using this. Alright, so maybe we can just use this texture creator component directly here and use that instead of writing a whole bunch of stuff here. So maybe we can just pass in this texture creator component. So we can just use this texture creator component. You'll have a texture creator component on your thing. You'll pass it into your flow field, and it'll update it, and then you can snag that later. All right, that makes sense. So that's the only function we need to actually mess with. So it's like texture component. We are going to call set data, and that's going to copy the data and do all that stuff. Well, I actually want to retrieve the data that's already existing inside of the texture creator component, which is inside of public components. So kind of what I want to do is I want to be able to access this stuff. So I mean, let's just make this all public and to hell with coding standards. There's only one engineer on this team, and that's me. Let's just turn all this into trash, and then we're gonna call build texture. And build texture is going to update its texture regions based on the data that we pass in, and that should be fine. If texture built and rebuild is false, alright, so the other thing that we're going to do is we want to set the texture size to a specific value. So the texture should be, if we go to our map utils, we should have the like immap.width and immap height. So we should be able to call that every frame, no problem. It just won't do anything. And let's go ahead and include the Dashkin texture creator component .h at the top of our file. So called build on the texture, and then we can actually go snag it. Alright, so theoretically we can actually just get this to work now. We should be able to fill it out with a whole bunch of noise and render it out somewhere into our water. And if we go into our event tick loop, we should be able to just keep updating this. We don't have to call the shader every time because we're just setting this thing to a transient texture. And then we're updating the texture in memory, so it should just be rewriting the data that exists every frame. We'll see what precision we can get away with. So this will be interesting. Eventually. Eventually it will be interesting. For now it will be boring. I wish I knew the exact, like, how expensive this thing is. Yeah, this is the note that I was looking at. Currently, EU4 doesn't support updating subregions of a texture, so if you update the entire thing every frame, or you'll end up with garbage. Yeah, and this is just the thing. Create Transient is the way to do it, supposedly. I don't see any big warning signs at the top of this that say, like, oh my god, never freaking use this. You will die in a horrible fire. All I really see is this doesn't work on, like, iOS. Yeah, exactly. And I wish I had that cool avatar stuff on my channel. Maybe I should bug Adam and ask him about the avatar stuff walking around. Though I have to decide if I really care that much about it. Alright, so we do have texture generators here. Are we even using them? Dynamic flow field texture creator. Let's find the references to it. Dynamic flow field, that's not what we're using, is it? Well, let's just override it for now. The stream avatar stuff? Oh, you have to buy it for $15 whole. I don't know, man. 15 bucks is too much money. I can't afford $15, as I say as I drink my $2 energy drink. It's easy enough to set up. I don't know. I might have to like write my own server and deal with that. Instead of paying $15 whole, I think I'll just build the whole infrastructure myself, just to save myself money, because I'm a stubborn bastard. All right, so let's start getting this. So we'll override the dynamic flow field texture creator. I think I need to, in the construction, don't we snag like, we spawn the calculated flow field, we initialize the variables, so we grab like the top left and top right and everything else. So we're gonna need to call the dynamic flow field texture creator. No, we're gonna need to call the flow field thing. Crap. I just need to call update ripples every tick on our flow field. That's what I need to do. So let's make a function here. Let's call it tick ripples. What a name. We'll snag this. We'll call update ripples on it. Alright, we'll grab this component and we'll just call update ripples. To do that, we'll call it every frame here. So let's go to our event graph. So begin play is init vars, and is there a tick or event tick? Let's call tick ripples, which sounds like something else, which is vulgar, but whatever, it's the internet. So we'll do that. That'll call update ripples, and then inside of our construction script we'll actually do that. This also needs to be able to be called in the editor. Start inside of the debug stuff so we can actually maybe mess with this a little bit. It's gonna create this thing every frame. Why don't we just... No, this shouldn't be callable in the editor. Let's just put this in default. And inside of our init vars, let's just do this ticking the ripples after we set up our basic math info. Uh-oh. Looks like we got a crash there because of this. Weren't checking if the texture is null or not. So I think it's the set texture size that we actually needed to call into. I thought we had just set our values. Just maybe begin play was getting called there and stuff was... Whatever, I can fix whatever needs to be fixed. Yeah, of course none of this got set. Alright, so we have the update in there. If we compile and save this, our construction script is going to go into initialize variables, which will set up our basic map info. And then we'll call this Alright, so we have the map width and height. So let's see exactly what happens here. Nothing is what it looks like. So build texture, texture width, texture height. Alright, so we created our new texture. Hello, Adam. I see you're upset. Are you upset because I took out your particles on the blueprint? Oh no, I knitted data. Why? I'm gonna call update texture regions, and it should all work out. But of course, I just locked up the goddamn thing. Let's see if we can detach from this, and maybe it'll unlock the editor. Okay, good, it did. Cool. Well, I'm expecting this to maybe in my update shader parameters. This is dynamic flow field, get texture on dynamic flow field texture creator. I'm supposed to pass it in as the test texture. Alright, well I will save and quit this, and then I can reattach the debugger. Yeah, Adam, I was going through different ideas on how to do the ripples, and I went through like what we could do with decals, and decals would be really good for non-moving ripples. We can animate decals. and all that stuff. But we can't do like vertex deformation on the decals and all that, which is kind of annoying. But they're not bad. We might do both. We might have decals. We'll probably need animated decals regardless anyway, but I think we'll probably need both animated decals and some of this dynamic flow field, ripple field stuff if we really want stuff to look good. Otherwise, it's basically moving water. It's just going to look like, I mean, if you had, like if Mighty was running over a moving stream, like a flowing river, it would just look bad. Like because the ripple would move. You could move in like one direction, but it wouldn't move like water moves. So you'd have to like make a custom ripple thing for that specific piece of water. You'd probably have to go draw that and make it look right. Hopefully we don't have to do that. Alright, so the issue here is this data got reset to the number inside of here, so what we have to do is, for us to actually write this value out, I have to set the data. So when we call set size, I'm going to have to I'm gonna have to mess with this. Alright, so bool, build. Alright, so if build, then we'll call build. Otherwise, we'll just have this thing in here. We'll initialize it to zip. So set texture size should have a Boolean value. It should be set to true by default. And this one's going to say false because it doesn't need it to actually build the texture, because we'll build it after setting the data ourselves. Yeah, the decal stuff looks pretty cool, but I don't know, I'm always not impressed by things. I mean, that was one of those just things that were just hilarious to some of my coworkers at Amazon. Is we had like free sandwiches one time, and I was just so pissed at these free sandwiches for being stupid. It's like, these free sandwiches suck, and just like, it's like, this guy throws up his hands. He's like, get a load of this guy. You can't even get him free sandwiches. He's always like, nothing's good enough. I'm like, well, I mean, they gave us like free sandwiches, but they also were trying to do like an engineering meeting, so everybody's like spending all this time like they had to make their own sandwich, right? Like they gave the sandwich catering thing was actual like meat and all that stuff, and these it's just a bunch of engineers, so it's like these people haven't washed their hands, like they're not the most sanitary of dudes rolling around, and everybody, let's just line up and just touch all the preparation materials with our nasty fingers that have been on keyboards that have been places, and then also like we're trying to have an engineering meeting, right? And so you have to spend like 20 minutes while like 30 or 40 people go through this fucking line getting free sandwiches and building all this stuff, and of course by the end there's not the bread you want isn't there because it got taken first. And half the condiments are all mixed together and stupid shit like that. And, there's no ham left either. There's just like a bunch of really crappy turkey or something that nobody wanted. And the only condiment left is like shitty mayonnaise. Like, this is a crappy sandwich. And then you start the meeting, and you know, of course, they handed out bags of chips because when you're gonna eat sandwiches, you're also gonna eat chips and cookies or whatever the fuck, right? So you're just there, and you know, you got like 30 people in a room on the big ass desk, and they're all fucking around with chip bags. Like how the hell are you supposed to hold a conversation when some asshole is like jiggling his bag of Sun Chips? Like get out of here. So that's kind of what happened with that whole thing. This is the best. Alright, so supposedly we're going through this data is empty. Why is the data empty? Alright. Texture, width, times and texture height. Yeah, let's just make sure that it all works. This is highly entertaining, not like that other dude. Yeah, this is the best stream. And see, that's the thing, is like I was so pissed off, and it was really, I was just angry that we're having these stupid engineering meetings at lunch where like I would actually go play Smash Brothers with other people, and the reason we'd be having these engineering meetings are because, you know, some engineering manager wants to talk about stuff, and you know, engineering lunches are just like the dumbest thing ever because everybody's just busy eating or digesting crap and being gross. And it doesn't help that there's always that one engineer who's like 5 million pounds sitting in the corner, like Dennis Nedry, who's just like, you guys want snacks? And, you know, just has no idea. Like one guy we had there was just gross. Like he would just like burp in the middle of stuff. I mean, he's worse than Adam. Alright, so we're going to get all this, and then we'll be able to fill this with random garbage. Ha, there we are. We have filled our texture with trash. And if you're looking closely, it's different trash every time. 5 million pounds and burping, that is worse. Yeah, like it was bad. Like, and he had no concept of like personal hygiene either, right? So, you know, and everyone else would just, you know, like there's a level of like social ignorance that you have, you know, like it's kind of polite if somebody is a little bit disgusting just to be like, oh, well, you know, he's just a little disgusting or something, you know, like I'm not his wife, you know, I'm his coworker or something. Like I can just, you know, pretend that you're actually a presentable human being. And, you know, just deal with stuff. I don't sit next to you, whatever, you know. But that doesn't mean you don't talk about him. Like everybody in the office would be like, Jesus Christ, you know, I was in this meeting with this guy and I think he like threw up in his mouth and just like swallowed it and then kept talking. And I just had to leave. And you're just like, oh yeah, you mean that guy? You're like, yeah, that guy. You're like, yeah, that guy. Okay, so we've got our texture here. It's got stuff on it. We can actually write stuff to it. So what we want to see is if we can actually write to this 60 times per second. So let's go to our... Are we actually already doing this? Are we... Yeah, so let's do stat FPS. So we're at 30 FPS here. Well, let's turn off that ticking and see if that's actually directly. I never used the performance tools for Unreal before. It might be something I could crack open and mess with. That's the wrong blueprint. Alright, so we'll go to our event graph and we're just gonna unhook this thing on the tick. Actually, was it because I was doing a... It's probably because I've got this update ripples info log, if anything. So let's just let's save and exit because I was log spamming and you can't log spam every frickin' frame. It's real expensive. Oh god, is that a real clip? But that doesn't mean you don't talk about him. Like everybody in the office, be like, Jesus Christ, I was in this meeting with this guy and I think he like threw up in his mouth and just like swallowed it and kept talking. I just had to leave. And you're just like, oh yeah, you mean that guy? You're like, yeah, that guy. You're like, yeah, that guy. That's pretty good. That's a keeper. That's a keeper clip. Jesus Christ. It's a pool of old school TVs. Yeah, I'd need to make a grayscale for that. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to figure out how expensive it is to render to every. You're gonna tweet that out, Jesus. The sad part is this guy had absolutely no like social awareness, so he would probably like if that person saw it, they would laugh at it and not know it was them. But every single other person that we were working with would know exactly who I'm talking about just from that clip. Oh man, it's like I went to DigiPen college, right? It's a programming college. It's small, like 500 people, right? So, um, you know, I think Rolling Stone did an article on DigiPen like in the 90s or some crap, and the picture was just two guys. They were going to not class, not after school clubs or anything. They just go into their friend's house to play Magic: The Gathering, and they had two trash bags full of Magic cards. That was the cover. So, all right, we're at 34 FPS. Let's see, is there any log spam? No. We're 4 or 5 frames per second faster though. All right, let's turn it off real quick in the update and see what it looks like. But yeah, so the interesting thing is I'll talk to people from different years who I never hung out with, and you'll be talking about, oh, like man, there were just some weird people at that school, and you talk about some of it, and looks like we're losing 10 frames per second to that tick, which is actually not too horrible. Because we can speed it up a little bit if we need to. But so we'd be talking about, oh man, this one guy, like, he just always asks stupid questions, and they'd be like, oh, you mean Hat Kid or something, and they'd be like, yeah, Hat Kid, that's what we called him, and like it was amazing how these people had these nicknames that everybody used for him. Like there was one guy that we called, some people called Tweak, and some people called L. And you knew immediately when somebody, like, I hadn't heard the nickname L for him, but when I was describing the guy who always ran around like an anime character, and they're like, oh yeah, you mean L? It's like, oh yeah, Tweak, and they're like, yeah, Tweak. Humans are amazing social animals that absolutely hate each other. It's great. That's why I live in a basement. Alright, so some other things I can mess with. I could try setting the texture size to half the width or something like that. I don't know how it would look on the surface of the water though. Social, what's that? Yeah, I know what you mean, Karakan. Or do I? And I'm just pretending. Maybe I'm like Adam and don't have a soul. You know? Maybe. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a package build here. I'm gonna have to disconnect my debugger to do so. Fuck. Ah, why is the terminate next to the detach? It's fucking bullshit. Alright, so while we're already doing this, let's put a scale factor in here, and we'll just, you know, like divide by a scale factor times 2 or whatever. It's fmath pow. Is there a power function in fmath? Let's see. There's no PAL function. What the hell? Why the fuck is there not a PAL function in the fmath library? What the hell? It's got F math in it. It's supposed to have all the math. That's so dumb. Alright, well I'll just put scale factor in here because I really don't care. Alright, so let's just change this value here. Update ripples, map utils, scale factor. Alright. Fmath is, the Unreal convention is to put F on front of everything. I don't know what the hell it stands for. Maybe it stands for front. But like you got U, that means like Unreal Object. It means like, you know, Unreal Object, I guess. I don't know what the hell it's for. But like I think it's like all structs and that sort of stuff. You know, you put the F on the front because somebody did it. You put like A on the front for stuff. Float math, but it's not all floats. Some of it's doubles, some of it's vectors, some of it's templated stuff for whatever you're using for your units. So it's definitely not float math. You know, that makes no sense. There's no reason. The basement, but it looks like the window with sun coming through. Yeah. It's like if this was Resident Evil, you know how they had picked people like living in the hive or whatever. Why is this getting pissed off? Scale factor is 0. Ah, we can't divide by 0. Yeah, I guess that would kind of be a problem, right? And this is having to do with basically a blueprint that's just getting initialized and getting run to begin with, is blowing itself up, which happens from time to time. But float just means floating point. C++ decided that it meant 32-bit float. I mean, let's just throw it out there. That's not the worst thing in programming that's ever happened. Now, that would also be a good question. What is the worst decision that has happened historically for programming languages? And why is it Java generics? That's the second question. But anyway, to circle all the way back, DigiPen was a very horrifying place for lots of people. We had the DigiPlague, which was when everybody would get sick because nobody washes themselves, and Lots of people would move out of their parents' houses for college, so there was nobody to wash their clothes for them either. There was the DigiFunk, which was the smell of the floor, which permeated the entire upstairs of the warehouse that was our school. Alright, so we got our scale factor in there. I'm going to test this out with a scale factor of... Let's put a scale factor of 4 on there and see what that does. So, you know, that would be 256 divided by 4, which is like, what, 128 or some bullshit? I don't know, I'm an engineer. So we're getting 40 FPS with that. If we have a scale factor of 2, we get a FPS of about 40. Scale factor of 1. We get a FPS of about 30. If we have a scale factor of 0.5, oh Jesus, it's an integer. I can't have a scale factor that low. Why do I exist? Let's just throw that in there. Virtual tables? This is fine, but it is also awful to explain. How many? Yeah. Also, good morning, Lucas. It is 4 in the morning for me. I mean, the obvious answer to what is the worst thing that's ever happened to programming, and it's clearly people. Clearly. Because there's nothing more obvious than having a giant pile of code and then revision control, and you're like, you know, why is all this stuff just a pile of trash that crashes all the time? And then you look at who wrote it, and it's just a bunch of people. Just a bunch of buttholes that just wrote code until they couldn't write code anymore, and then it fell apart, and you're wondering what the hell they did with their lives. And then they're like, well, that's why we hired the intern. He's going to fix this crap for us. That's just what happens. Alright, so let's put a 0.5 scale factor on this thing. Let's see how that affects it. So that should be 1024 by 1024 texture. We'll see what our FPS... Yeah, ooh. Our FPS drops like a fucking rock. So if we're going to write to a texture every single frame without blowing up, what exactly is it about this that's going to be messing with it? Is there something stupid inside of build texture that we're doing? And we're calling update resource every single time. Is that something we actually need to call? Alright, after every call to lock and unlock, you must call update resource. This deletes the RHI texture and recreates it, so it won't be fast, but if done infrequently is simpler to use. We don't need to call update resource, do we? This is this is actually blowing up the texture every single frame. We don't need it. We don't need to do it. So let's not do that then. Alright, Sinacron, thanks for sticking around. Hopefully you have a good rest of your night. Which should involve with, I guess, sleeping. Which is usually a good decision when you're tired. Yeah, hopefully my schedule wraps around again soon. Yeah, it'll get there eventually. Yeah, I really do have just like this ridiculous 30-hour day. And it'll roll around to like a reasonable time where I'll be awake. And then I can go do things like go to the store. Otherwise, it's like wake up and the store's closing in 20 minutes, and you're like, ah, damn it. That's what I hated about living in Bellevue during college. It's just everything closes at Bellevue like immediately. It's just annoying. Alright, so we need to call this once, is what it looks like, I believe. That's what this thing is telling me. Yeah, it's even more interesting when there's only like something that's open, you know, 1 day a week or 2 days a week or something. Like the frickin' rifle range over here is only open to non-members on like Friday and Monday. I'm like, man, I gotta like plan my entire week around this. I could always like pay, you know, $10 and become a member, but like, whatever. I don't like their coffee anyway. If there's a handler for this exception of the program, maybe break. So yeah, this is me learning about dynamic textures in Unreal 4 and all that. I'm pretty sure we can get away with some of this. Like, we did scene capture crap and all that sort of stuff where we're updating textures based on, you know, actually drawing the goddamn scene a couple times. And we did that for our sandwich camera a while ago. So we're not using the sandwich camera anymore. We're using the actual, like, you know, real world non-sandwich camera. And the reason I call it the sandwich camera was because we were literally rendering one, you know, part of the frustum and then another part of the frustum and smashing them together like a sandwich. In the middle of our sandwich was our actual like track for our character running around, and that was an orthographic projection that we sandwiched together. You know, we did things with 3D math that you really shouldn't do with 3D math, and it didn't really work too well. So we stopped doing it. Alright, so we're at 10 FPS here. Let's just make sure, let's walk through our function real quick. The build texture is called true. we are just calling update texture regions, which is going through with our texture regions, in-queuing our render command, and we're not even doing anything else. So like we're pretty much doing this as efficiently as possible. Like we're not doing a whole bunch of trash. And we've got a for loop that goes through every color in our data. We're not copying anything. We're using the data on this object. We're not rebuilding it. Maybe we are rebuilding it. Let's just... No, we are not rebuilding it. And what scale factor is this? This is 0.5, I believe. So 1024 by 1024 texture is just trashed here. Alright, well let's make that shipping build and see if there's any difference. So we'll detach our thing. Thank you for following Celestial Ken. That's a pretty cool name. As opposed to just normal Ken, I'm guessing. Alright, so the FPS is trash. Let's make a shipping build real quick. Hopefully, Mr. Celestial, you are having a good time. Or a good day. I am just working on programming stuff, so it's just a lot of banging my head against the wall. So package this up and we'll run a release build of it. A full release. You can only run the Unreal editor in quote-unquote development. You can't run it in full release because there's too much like broken crap in the editor, that according to Epic, so it doesn't work in shipping. And there's a lot of differences with shipping builds and non-shipping builds in terms of really efficient loops and everything. So I would expect perhaps a massive performance difference to be between development and shipping, or writing to like a texture at runtime. So that's kind of what I'm testing out here. Same thing for particles. Like if you have some particles in the editor and they look like they're performing really awfully, don't optimize it until you actually go run a shipping build and see if it's a real problem. Because it may be a real actual fake problem that you believe you have that does not really exist. Kind of like, you know, probably the entire universe. So you should just ignore it and focus on something important, like making sure to pay your Comcast bill. At least that would be my advice. So if we can get to this, the next thing is if ripples, if we have texture size issues, the next thing is going to be like, at what resolution do we actually need the textures for ripples? If we can get away with a lower resolution texture and kind of smooth it out or do something with it, we might be able to get away with that. Otherwise, we'd have some problems because we have one texture which is going to, you know, possibly scale over a body of water which is quite big in the level. And it might look like absolute trash, because this one texture has to cover, you know, this gigantic lake, and that's different for some of these things. Like we can use noise textures and all the rest of this crap, you know, to draw on the surface of it, but we're like working in world space and everything for like UV coordinates, or at least we should be. I actually need to change that in the material. But so like we make the body of water bigger, and all it does is like the flow field stuff gets lower res, but it still looks correct. It's just, you know, turbulence will look, it might look blocky at some point. I don't know, but it'll look fine. But if we actually have graphical effects like ripples based on the size of the texture, then the texture needs to be big enough so that we have good precision, otherwise it's going to look freaking horrifying. Which would be a good reason to use decals as opposed to this dynamic texture creation shit that I'm working on, because decals are going to have the precision of the decal which should be very high. And this cook will be done in just a little bit here. It's actually copying it to the staging during. There we go. So let's pop this open. And it's still just trash. Like, do not adjust your televisions. It looks just as bad for me. Alright, so updating texture at runtime in Unreal is a really bad plan. So don't do it. I mean, can we get away with... I mean, that looked even slower than some of the others. So we'd be limited to like a 512 by 512 texture for body of water is what it looks like. Let me just put a scale factor of 1 on here. .30 frames per second here. Let's cook this one as well and see if it has the same terrifyingly bad stuff. Because if we can't even cook a 512 by 512 texture, I don't think this plan will work at all. And it's not like I'm running on like a 1950s nickel toaster under my desk. I mean, there's at least a couple of hamsters running down there, so I highly doubt it's going to run on a single hamster machine. Not that I have anything against hamsters. Actually, I really hate hamsters. They're stupid animals. They look dumb, too. Feels about 30 FPS. Or more, maybe 30 or 40. It's not amazing though, and of course we've got some issues with writing to the texture to begin with. That's a 512 by 512 texture. Well, let's close down the editor and see if that maybe had any